Introduction to the Wild Dog of Cyberpunk Night City. This is Cyberpunk 2077, I am not V. I am just a pitiful creature with a soul piercing through the city of night. People drowned in pungent alcohol. The streets were filled with the smell of garbage, dazzling neon lights, and the cries, gunshots, and bloodstains in the alleys. Cheap and vulgar food, movies, pleasure, and music are constantly eroding people's lives. 1. Goodbye, 2023. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Today is the last night of 2023. No one is preparing firecrackers on the streets of Chengzhai. The old men would rather spend 10 billion yuan to buy a pile of colorful light bulbs to hang on the trees on both sides of the main road, than buy some industrial salt to sprinkle on the street to melt the snow. The strong wind, wrapped in snowflakes, howled between the buildings, emitting a piercing and loud sound. People are exposed to the -15-degree wind and snow, yet still have to spin aimlessly on their bearings. I don't know who my teeth are pushing or who I am being pushed by. This is basically the source of all people's sadness. Although one can roughly guess what the street is like without looking out the window, Lee Runs, who was sitting by the window, still took a surreal look outside. The ground on the street is covered with newly fallen thin snow, and after the snow falls, there will probably be more people with broken bones in this dying city. Under the dim yellow streetlights, there were still people setting up snack stalls, and the glass of each handcrafted car was covered in thick frost and mist. A faint white water vapor sprayed down the small pipe on the roof of the car. The college student boxed lunch in the small stall is Lee Run's favorite, with 3 delicious dishes for 10 yuan each. Unfortunately, the boss went home to mourn and closed the door early, as if fleeing, otherwise dinner would have been resolved there. Sure enough, that street, what are you looking forward to? The roar of motorcycles pulled Lee Run's back to reality. It's this group of street bombers again. Riding a small motorcycle must make the noise bigger than a Harley. Lee Runs couldn't help but think as he looked at the ghostly fire convoy shuttling through snack stalls outside the window. He is just an ordinary second-tier college student, born in 2004. In fact, just sharing his parents' experiences can also lead to writing a novel. It still has a touch of lingering charm. My father, who graduated from junior high school, once saved up a large fortune through his fists and not very civilized but legal methods. The old man suffered from malnutrition and was not tall when he was young. At the age of 35, with a height of 165 and a weight of 180 pounds, he had no fat all over his body. His wrist was thicker than an ordinary person's calf, and he could lift an adult man's collar with one hand. With both hands gripping the car door, he could tear it off directly, which was also related to the weight of the car at that time. His father is fond of making friends and never cares about his status. The director can also submit it, the wealthy can also submit it, and the beggar can also submit it. Quickly accumulating a network that could be considered luxurious at the time. Unfortunately, I made friends carelessly and got drunk at the table and was deceived into taking drugs. Later, he was controlled by drugs and engaged in many childless activities. When this thing comes into contact, money is like opening a floodgate to release floodwaters. I tried to detoxify myself and tied myself to a wooden board with iron chains for several days, but in the end, I tortured myself to death without success. Then Bentley was gone, the house was gone, the little brother was gone, and his head was almost lost in Yunnan. After being arrested and sentenced, he was only given a death sentence with a reprieve and was almost released. Young Lee Runs curled up in the corner of the roadside with his mother in the heavy snow and thick fog at dusk in the spring city of November. The vast white mist enveloped the mother and son, trapped in the fog and desperate to withstand the impact of the blizzard. Xiao Lee Runs celebrated his 5th birthday in hunger. My mother picked up Xiao Lee Runs and wrapped her body around him, trying to prevent the cold wind from blowing through him. They can't afford cold medicine anymore. Xiao Lee Runs remained ignorant and confused in his mother's arms, feeling the comfort of her body temperature. tears would freeze as soon as they flowed out of the corners of her eyes. Although Xiao Li Run's eyes were covered by his mother's cold hands, he could still hear her gentle sobs amidst the roar of engines on the street. He didn't know what had happened, but he knew the feeling of heartache from then on. Li Run's always takes his time with those who joke about his background and rarely suffers losses. Because his father started off with his fists, he also has some inherited skills. In short, he is currently studying at a university in Jiangcheng, and New Year's Day is approaching. His roommates from all over the country are already on their way home. He still has to struggle to stay in his dormitory. The people in the school have almost left, and Li Runs can also use the time left for delivering food to play games. Straightened up, crossed hands and flipped upwards. The 10-finger joints made a clicking sound, and then shrugged his shoulders left and right to fully move. Then he eagerly crouched in front of the table and grabbed the mouse. It's better to live in the gaming world, it would be even better, This idea was immediately forgotten by Li Runs. Yo, it's updated. He sat on a plastic chair and looked at the updated icon displayed on Steam in his notebook, speechless for a moment. However, upon careful consideration, there seems to be nothing to complain about. Just update it. After clicking the mouse, as soon as I lowered my head to grab my phone, the computer immediately heard a sound. Ding! Suddenly, a warning sound came from the front, and Li Run's eyelids twitched as he looked forward. The gray, Start Game icon on the Cyberpunk interface lit up at some point, and this time it turned red, looking strange. He sat up straight and grabbed the mouse to check again. After hesitating for a moment, I clicked on the seemingly abnormal, Start Game, button. Then he grabbed a spicy strip and stuffed it into his mouth, leaned back, staring at the screen and waiting quietly. But the launcher didn't pop up on the screen, it suddenly turned red. Did you get infected with the virus? Li Run's mouth slightly opened, but no sound came out. The bright red screen quickly turned black again, and then there were strings of red-lit zeros and ones floating horizontally and vertically on it. He sat up straight again, feeling a bit strange in his heart, but the intuition of a software professional told him that it wasn't like the computer was broken. He got up and went to get the water cup on the shelf above his head. I picked up my cup and took a sip, then glanced at the computer and suddenly felt something was wrong. The white computer keyboard turned black, and it was crawling with the kind of zeros and ones on the screen. Li Runs put the cup back. After calming down, he leaned up and bent down, propping his arms on the table to carefully observe. Then he didn't calm down in an instant. That string of zeros and ones is not actually on the computer screen, but slowly spreading out from the screen. Li Runs suddenly felt uncomfortable and stood up with a jerk, taking a few steps back. The iron chair legs rubbed against the tiled floor, making a very piercing creaking sound, causing his scalp to tighten. Unfortunately, it's too late to be vigilant now. The code enveloping the black space rapidly expanded, and red zeros and ones attacked Li Runs like arrows. After Li Runs finally regained his senses, he suddenly felt light all over. Gravity has disappeared. Immediately afterwards, there was a faint difficulty breathing. The shouting that was already in my throat when the code hit couldn't even get out of my throat. Because this place has no air at all. His eyes widened to the point of pain in his eyes, and his limbs flapped helplessly in the black space, with a series of codes piercing through his body and flapping limbs on their own. He felt his blood boil on its own under extremely low air pressure. The tongue is drying out because the boiling blood has taken away the water. The feeling of suffocation became heavier and heavier, and Li Runs instinctively extended his hands to his throat, but his throat could not feel his hands for a long time. Li Run's mind had already been filled with suffocating panic. The code in front of me is gradually blurring, and my consciousness is also gradually leaving. With the light of a string of codes and a faint sense of consciousness, he realized that his hands had disappeared. Then the final consciousness told him that the pitch black in front of him proved that his eyes had also disappeared. And then the consciousness completely disappeared, the pain also disappeared. The light bulb sizzled for 2 seconds before suddenly going out, and the UU reading code disappeared into the darkness with Lee runs. It's just a simple moment of disappearing in place. It seems like everything is a dream. It seems as if there has never been code, as if there has never been Lee runs and his struggles. In the small dormitory, only a white notebook screen was shining faintly, displaying Cyberpunk update in progress, 6% updated update speed 40 meters per second. The red start game is also missing, and it has returned to updating. A clattering sound of slipper footsteps came from the door. The classmate in the neighboring dormitory, who was disturbed by the sound of stools, cursed and pushed open the door of Lee run's dormitory. The corridor lights instantly illuminated half of the dormitory. Just as I pushed it away, I started cursing. How many times have I told you that there is a cushion under his mother's stool? He looked into the room, grabbed the door with his left hand, hooked the door frame with his right hand, and half leaned into the bedroom, stunned. Where are people? A few seconds later, he also poked his lower body into the dormitory and released his right hand, which was hooked on the door frame, to press the light switch. I pressed it several times, but there was no bright light, just a popping sound. The light is also broken. He scratched his head and closed the door. After darkness once again enveloped this small space, there was a holographic projection of a woman in front of the computer, her whole body composed of flowing red zeros and ones. Her legs penetrated the cushion of the chair in front of the computer, as if she had worn a mold. She doesn't seem to appear slowly, but rather as if she has always been there. A somewhat ethereal and emotionless female voice came through. The variable has been added. At the moment when the dormitory lights lit up, she disappeared into the dormitory. 2. Who am I, where am I? You are listening at novelfull.audio. I earn money, I make food, I wash clothes, and I have to pay the rent. Why are you such a big old man? A woman's roar came, but it didn't sound very true. Cooking. Throwing Dexkin's fast food into the heater, do you call this cooking? The man raised his voice and shouted in an incredible tone, I didn't mean to ask you to pay the rent in full. Is it so difficult for us to cut in half? I'm so arrogant of you for doing so little things. Who made the coffee? Who wiped the floor? Who bought your clothes? Who paid for the electricity bill? The more the man spoke, the more excited he became, but the sound of all of this was somewhat distorted and somewhat jarring. The sunlight passes through the thick smoke in the sky, reflecting back and forth between the various glass buildings towering into the clouds in the night city, and finally shining into thousands of households. In the city of the night, the layout facing north and south is meaningless, as sunlight may come from any direction, you're unlikely to want to breathe, who knows what's in the wind. There's a smell of gasoline and ammonia. Listening to the noise, Lee runs was wriggling like an earthworm on the bed, his hands swaying haphazardly under the influence of his shoulders, and his eyes hadn't opened yet. Suddenly, a dazzling white light pierced through Lee run's eyelids and entered his eyes, causing Lee run's scalp to tighten and his head to ache. I opened my eyes in a daze. It turned out that I had patted the light switch by the bedside with my hand. Lee runs lay flat on the bed, his eyes fixed on the dark white ceiling. I have no thoughts in my mind. Just silently staring at the ceiling, his brain seemed to have crashed at this moment. After a long time, the noise next door finally came to an end. The first idea only appeared in Lee run's empty mind, who am I? The dead brain slowly began to spin at a very slow speed, and it took him a while before he finally found his answer in his mind. My name is Lee runs. Staring at the ceiling for a while, another question popped up in my mind. Where am I now? I thought for a while in my mind, but couldn't find the answer. Continuing to lie in bed for a while, suddenly an idea jumped into my mind. I have to stand up and walk. So the brain drove Lee runs to clumsily get up from the bed. Why did he have to get up and walk? Lee runs himself didn't know that his confused brain didn't support him thinking so much. Lee Runs had to think for a while about every action he took to wake up and the next one he wanted to connect with. It took 4 minutes to get up hard. At least I stood up, but it still shook a bit. After standing up, his eyes began to slowly turn and gaze at this small room. Garbage, everywhere is garbage, everywhere is garbage. Next to the head of the bed is a large metal plate set against a white wall, with evenly distributed horizontal stripes in the middle. I don't know exactly what it is for. On the opposite side, there is a slightly dirty yellow sofa and a white coffee table covered in stains arranged neatly on the black porcelain and yellow striped floor tiles. On the coffee table, next to a pile of plastic packaging bags covered in oil stains, there is a metal headband-like object. Above the sofa and coffee table is a cone-shaped object protruding from the ceiling, with 4 circular holes with glass on top. I don't know what it is. On the right side, there is a glass door on the wall directly opposite, and further to the right is a wardrobe hanging a pile of colorful clothes. Behind the open cabinet door is a large piece of glass that is 1 person tall. There is a thick yellow and white door on the wall next to it, and there is no visible metallic luster on the door handle. It's a computer desk, which is very clean, with almost no dirt except for a bit of dust. Lee Runs half opened his eyes and looked at everything unfamiliar in front of him. He couldn't help but make some sounds that were completely indescribable, just a meaningless noise in his nose and throat. He felt that his mind was not clear enough. Looking back, my bed is actually a small space protruding from the wall towards the outside of the room, like a relief set on the wall. Lee Runs was able to stand steadily and walked unsteadily towards the glass door in front of him. Passing through the tinkling plastic shells and aluminum cans on the ground, he felt his mind spinning faster and faster. Take a closer look, why isn't there a doorknob here? Reaching forward, the door brushed and shrank into the wall. He was startled. Lee Runs suddenly felt a bit novel, but also a bit familiar, and he couldn't explain where he was familiar. Stepping into the small room with his right foot, Lee Runs scrutinized the scattered things on the ground that looked like suitcases, with a pile of empty hangers on the wall. Then he also followed in with his left foot. The glass door behind me brushed and closed again. There was a slight panic in my heart. There is a sticky note stuck below the hanging rack every 10 centimeters. Lee Runs leaned in and saw that the one in front of him read 4.5, and then picked up the one on the right, which read 4.6. Some are confused. Looking down, there was a roll of paper tied up with rubber bands, and next to it was a small, sharp black knife. The somewhat cool appearance tells Lee Runs that this thing may not be for human use. But there is also uncertainty. After all, there is a similar cool knife in Lee Runs' dormitory, and Lee Runs uses it to open packages. Thanks to the sunset, that thing is not expensive either. No, dormitory. As soon as this idea entered his mind, Lee Runs' eyes widened in an instant. Yeah, isn't I playing on the computer? How did I come here? Where am I? Where is my mother? What is this place? A series of questions flooded into Lee Runs' brain, causing him to panic. He quickly turned around and ran towards the glass door behind him. The glass door brushed and opened on its own, causing it to pop out of balance and fall to the ground. Now the left half of the body is touching the ground first. It hurts a bit this time, but it shouldn't hurt anything. Lee Runs didn't care about these things and, enduring the pain, got up and looked around in panic, only to find something like a shower next to the computer desk. Stumbling forward quickly, he began to search for the switch on the wash basin, hoping to wash his face and calm down. I searched for 2 seconds but couldn't find it, but the faucet suddenly started spraying cool water, which caught Lee Runs off guard. Reading www.uukangshu.net. Then the water splashed and splashed on his face. Leaning on the edge of the sink and looking up, there was a mirror. When he saw that he was the same as his previous life in the mirror, his pupils suddenly narrowed, restoring all the memories of his previous life. The wash basin didn't sense anything and closed itself. The water still remaining at the outlet is still converging into droplets and falling downwards. Dida, looking at himself in the mirror, Lee Run's froze in place. After a long while, he came to his senses and stared at the sensing faucet in front of him, unable to help but think. Where am I? I wasn't kidnapped by someone, was I? Lee Run's eyes widened wider, then calmed down his restless heart and poured some water on his face. Taking a long breath, he turned around and looked at the room. Suddenly, I heard a burst of emotionally charged English coming from somewhere, as if separated by a wall. The sound was very low, but in this room where the needles could be heard, it was also very outstanding. He immediately stopped all movements and raised his ears to feel the source of the sound. Following the sensation in my ears, I finally walked up to the thing by the bed that seemed to be a blinds, thinking to myself, we need to open this thing. Then the blinds seemed to sense Lee Run's thoughts, and in his shocked gaze, the seemingly heavy blinds silently and lightly rose up. After watching the blinds rise, he began to look out the window, and the scenery outside made his brown pupils shrink sharply. The orange-yellow glow that rushed towards him had completely enveloped him, and he suddenly felt his shoulders and chest slightly open. Lee Run's stood completely in place, in the sunlight reflected from the glass of the buildings in Night City. 3. Have I traveled? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Light, there is dazzling light everywhere. Lee Run's could tell that he actually lived very high, and when he looked down, he couldn't even see the pedestrians on the ground, but compared to the towering skyscrapers in front of him, it was almost like a bungalow. The Tongtian pagodas are located high and low, with various regular glass and pipes of unknown use arranged on their bodies. The sharply defined walls and black-gray concrete give a sharp and ruthless feeling. But every building will be covered with billboards in areas without glass, which may be used to cover pipes. The billboard is constantly looping with vibrant advertisements filled with elements of violence, ugliness, sex, and drugs. The advertisements that radiate signals directly to the brain, constantly stimulating the nerves, have a strong contrast with the cold gray concrete. Many buildings also have long, rolling holographic advertising light strips that extend from the bottom all the way up to 700 or 800 meters to the top. There are even some holographic advertising light bands that pass through the sky, breaking free from the constraints of the building and reaching the clouds before disappearing. It is truly a spectacle. The top layer of the Tongtian Tower often has a different design than the tower body below. The gentle curves and warm colors belong only to the top layer, and the buildings on the top layer block the upward extension of holographic stripes and also block the sunlight on the lower layer, growing on the top of the tower in a very abrupt style like illegal buildings. The beautiful houses generously allowed the antennas in the lower building to be at the same height as themselves, which must be the gentlemanly demeanor of the upper-class elders. The rooftops of those buildings all have a constant spray of white water vapor, which is one of the few commonalities. Lee Run's looked at the black airship shuttling between the buildings, pulling a light blue holographic advertisement, and suddenly became dazed. What city is this? Is it the legendary Dubai? Is this the scenery that can be seen in 2023? Lee Run's lowered his head and looked at the orderly flow of small sand and large dots of various colors on the street. Suddenly, he realized that they were people and cars, and he became a bit afraid of heights. I took a few steps back, tried to close the blinds with my mind, and then turned my gaze back into the room. Backed against the wall and closed his eyes, he digested what he saw. The faucet is still making a sound. Dida, it's very harsh in the quiet room. Listening to the sound of water droplets, he was a bit distracted. But the rhythm of water droplets is also slowing down. He felt a change in rhythm and recovered from being distracted. I suddenly wanted to go out and take a look. When I looked down, I found that I was not wearing clothes, but I didn't feel cold, as if the temperature in this room was prepared for him to sleep naked. After the novelty, his gaze fell on the wardrobe. Lee Run's walked forward and picked out a few clothes. Finally, I put on a red tank top with a white wolf head printed on it and a pair of tight black leggings, as well as a pair of orange sneakers. I looked at myself in the mirror on the cabinet door. A height of 1.75 meters, neither tall nor short. My body is quite sturdy, about 80 kilograms. The two exposed arms are thick, but faint muscle lines can also be seen. There are a little tough lines on the slightly round face. With a tall nose bridge and not too big eyes, grab a large round frame and put it on, then look in the mirror again, and it looks much better. Although not as handsome as a handsome guy, it is very pleasing to the eye. Why does it fit so well? Isn't it too fancy? Lee Runs, who has never worn a color other than black and white in his lifetime, still wants to change to a more low-key one, but he can't find it in this wardrobe. Lee Runs plans to go out. The thick door had no door handle, and he tentatively stood in front of it. As expected, the door opened with a swipe of his own. As soon as he stepped out of the room, a putrid odor mixed with a cold feeling rushed into his nose. He couldn't help but curse, but still didn't say anything. About 10 flies were buzzing around the door, crashing into each other and running into the house. Lee Runs slowly walked out of the door, his eyes constantly looking left and right, and then the door brushed and he closed it again. He's a bit flustered. What if he can't go back? But it's no use panicking. The door has already closed, so I can only suppress the panic in my heart and continue to look around. In front is a 2-meter wide corridor, with several dim lights evenly hanging in the black and gray corridor. The dim lamp tubes illuminated the scattered garbage and overflowing trash cans on the ground, as well as the remnants of flies. And scattered graffiti on the wall was also photographed. At the end of the corridor on the right seems to be a corner, while at the end of the left there are several high-tech looking, brightly lit vending machines. Someone is still shouting something with a loudspeaker, and the sound echoes in the hallway. When it reaches here, it is already distorted to the point where it cannot be heard clearly. Next to the garbage can on the left is an old man wearing a blue bathrobe, who seems to be smoking. On the right, there is an Asian woman wearing sunglasses with red mosaic dry hair. She is wearing an indigo off-the-shoulder top, revealing 2 thighs, and is using high heels that look like plastic to stamp out her recently smoked butt. Lee Runs instantly felt that he was dressed conservatively. The overhead lights flickered, accompanied by the echoes of the loudspeakers, giving off a faint horror movie vibe. He bravely stepped forward to talk to the woman Moshigan. Hello. The woman's eyebrows furrowed in an instant, and she shouted with a broken gong in her throat, "Why should I bother smoking a cigarette? Can't I solve it by myself when my pants are tight? Get out." Lee Run's eyebrows furrowed in an instant. What a big deal. What a big fire. I couldn't help but give her a sidelong glance, which happened to meet the gaze of this very impolite woman, but she seemed completely indifferent to her attitude. After thinking about it for a while, I don't know how to reply, but then I think it's better to talk to someone else. He found the bathrobe old man smoking next to the trash can again. "Grandpa, may I ask you something?" Lee Runs leaned behind the old man and asked. The old man turned around and took a puff of smoke, completely spraying it on Lee Run's face. But what's amazing is that this thing doesn't have a smoky smell, instead it has a fruity flavor. He had the experience of being sprayed with smoke for the first time, and it was messy in the smoke. The old man reached out and fanned the cigarette in front of him, speaking in a flat tone, "What's going on?" As the smoke dissipated, Lee Run's hair stood up in an instant. What about this old man's eyes? The old man had no eyes, replaced by a silver mechanical base and 2 red display screens on the base. 6 red dots were arranged in 2 rows, serving as 1 eye on the display screen. The eerie feeling that rushed towards me appeared particularly eerie in this dimly lit corridor. Am I going to hell now? Looking at Lee Runs, who remained silent, I felt that the old man who had wasted his time no longer had any apologies in his heart, and there was a bit of impatience in his words. What exactly can you say? Lee Runs regained his composure and suppressed his doubts, asking the biggest question. What is this place? The old man was taken aback for a moment, then tilted his head and took another puff. He looked at him for a while, but remained silent. The corridor echoed with echoes from somewhere unknown. Did you have someone kidnap you? No, I've seen you here before, kid. Did you lose your memory after taking medication? This is the Night City, have you forgotten? The old man took another puff of smoke and then turned back to look at him. Lee Runs felt as if he had heard of this name somewhere before and searched for it in his mind. But his brain has not fully recovered from chaos yet, he is basically a newly awakened vegetative person. Watching Lee Runs standing still and speechless, the old man's last bit of patience was exhausted. Go away, don't disturb me smoking. Lee Runs was scolded back to his senses. I said sorry and left. Lee Runs stood in front of the door where he came out, pondering the words of the master. Did I live here before? After thinking about the door for a while, the next door suddenly opened and a woman with high heels, white shirt, black skirt, and high ponytail walked out, looking like an OL. Then she seemed to have forgotten something again, turned around and pressed her finger on a screen next to the door, and the door opened. When I came out again, I had an extra bag on my shoulder and hurriedly left. Then Lee Runs followed suit and pressed his finger onto the screen next to the door, and it really opened. The screen still displayed, verification successful, welcome home. Now Lee Runs became even more confused, and then he walked into the room feeling lost, lying on the bed with his thoughts constantly churning in his mind. In the end, an idea flashed through his mind that had just escaped from the realm of paced Night City. Cyberpunk. Have I traveled? For ready to go. You are listening at novelfull.audio. BB, I don't know what made a noise. The rough electronic sound woke up Lee Runs, who was lying in bed staring blankly at the ceiling once again. Thinking about my unfinished studies, roommates, classmates, and my unimpressive dad who was supposed to reunite with us soon. Thinking about the old lady who knew she might have a recurrence of heart disease after missing, Lee Runs couldn't help feeling sad in his heart. My grandma is already in her 80s this year. She was so angry when she found out about my dad's wrongdoing. If I were to give my grandma a hard time, I might as well just use that small black knife to kill myself. Thinking of this, Lee Runs' chest became even more congested, his heart ached in waves, his expression twitched and twisted, but there were no tears left. Sigh, Mom. Just pretend you haven't given birth to my son, I can only repay it in the next life. What the hell did I do? What the hell did I do? I have been fasting and chanting Buddha with my mother since I was young, and I have never done less good deeds, and it's never for the sake of that bullshit, the ultimate happiness of the West. To be honest, I don't really believe in those gods and Buddhas. Isn't it true that such a terrible thing happened to me? It's too fucking. Thinking of myself struggling to survive alone in this almost completely unfamiliar city, a huge fear swept through my body, and suddenly a year flashed by. Perhaps death is liberation. Thinking of this, Lee Runs pulled out the small knife and stared at it for a while. After careful consideration for a while, I decided to comb and wash before embarking on the road. I walked to the sink and put down the knife, took off my glasses, and then took some water and splashed it on my face. I feel much calmer now. Looking up in the mirror, I realized that my face was covered in stubble. Even if you walk, it's clean and tidy. A pile of messy things, soap, toothpaste, toothbrushes, and towels, were dug up in the mirror cabinet. It's just that there's no razor. Lee Runs was once again angry, and then he saw the small black knife. It's just you. Lee Runs squeezed out a little toothpaste and rubbed it on his face for a while, then used a small knife to hang it on his face for a while. Put on your glasses again and look up at yourself in the mirror. This is just right. Lee Runs grabbed the knife and washed it clean under the faucet, but hesitated again. A few minutes later, Lee Runs gave up. I dare not even kill myself, his mother. Li Run's self-deprecatingly said. After self-deprecating, Li Run's collapsed on the bed again. Goo, the stomach was protesting, and Li Run's realized that he was already very hungry. If you dare not die, then live well. I'm sure I can live like a person. Staring at himself in the mirror, Li Run secretly made up his mind and his gaze gradually became firm. But determined not to fill his stomach, he began to search for food in the unfamiliar room. In addition to finding an empty bag on the shelf, I found no food in the whole house. This house is in addition to dilapidation. Is this his mother a dump? After being busy for a while, I sat back on the sofa and shook my head alone. I still had to go out and find something to eat. Come back and tidy up. Li Run's muttered to himself and walked towards the door. This time, when he looked at the door from the sink, he found a strange belt hanging in front of the wardrobe door, behind the large mirror. He hadn't seen it before due to angle reasons. Li Run's took it over and placed it on his waist for a gesture. It felt very suitable, but there was a large slot in the front and middle of the belt with the mouth facing upwards. I don't know what it was for. Li Run's looked at this slot and suddenly it seemed to match the size of the blade of the small black knife very well. Li Run's went over to pick up the small knife, tentatively poked the blade inside, and then with a snap sound, the small knife was perfectly stuck. This is the groove of the small knife. Li Run's tried to pull it out, and then felt that the bottom of the knife was like a spring, and the knife bounced upwards with a whoosh. Li Run's instantly understood what this thing was for. Men just like to fight and kill. I learned about a sinister technique called Chechen assassination when watching videos before. When the other person is about 1 meter away from you, you can first say some soft words and raise your hands slightly to let them relax their vigilance. Then, taking advantage of their unpreparedness, quickly draw the knife with your right hand, facing down, and stab the person in front of you in the throat. Because the distance is not very far, skilled people can complete the entire action in 1 second. With this belt, the process of assassination can be reduced to about half a second. Li Run's tried it a few times and it really worked well. Although it's not very useful in this night city where there are more firearms than chopsticks. But at least it's a reliance, better than going out empty-handed. Li Run's wants to know the time. Then he opened the blinds with his mind. As a result, something magical happened. As the window opened, a string of light blue numbers popped up in front of me. April 5, 2077. Li Run's didn't panic much. After all, he had already accepted the cyberpunk setting, but it was still a bit shocking. It seems that the idea of looking at the time activated the built.in time display. I remembered the date written on the sticky notes on the shelf in the storage room, which seemed to be April 5. Then I looked at the food packaging bags and corpses scattered all over the floor. Li Run's seems to understand a bit, so am I counting my rations on a daily basis. This has been too miserable, right? How much money do I have left? With a sudden thought, Li Run's learned that his savings were 400 euros. Thinking of the paper tied with rubber bands on the shelf, Li Run's flipped it out as well. Upon opening it, it looks like a banknote with a euro symbol on it, which should be the euro. After counting, the deposit increased to 600 euros. How much can I buy? Li Run's himself doesn't know. What if he doesn't have enough food to buy? No, there are no real vegetables or meat at the bottom of the night city anymore. They are high-end items that only wealthy old men can enjoy. Looking at the packaging bags on the ground, Li Run's estimated that he could only eat this kind of food. After tidying up his mood and walking out of the house, Li Run's chose to leave 200 euros in cash at home. In the realm of Night City, eggs cannot be placed in the same basket, even if I'm just going to get something to eat. Li Run's doubts whether the people of Night City recognize eggs. With a swipe, the door opened and Li Run's cautiously walked out of the room again. He found the fancy vending machine in the corridor, with a dynamic circular holographic yellow arrow constantly pointing towards the payment interface, as if afraid you wouldn't know how to use it. I chose something that looks like a pancake and chose to buy it. Then there was a small line of characters on the left half of Li Run's eyes. 11 cents. With a thud, an additional bag appeared in the groove below. Li Run's grabbed him in his hand and shook it, but it was quite heavy. Li Run's doesn't plan to eat it in the hallway, as the smell of death is so strong that he feels a bit dizzy just by smelling it verbally. The old man in the smoking bathrobe left at some point, changed into a blue shirt and black tight pants, and the black girl with blonde hair and explosive head was smoking there. The tight pants outline a round shape, and there are obvious marks of prosthetic transformation on both arms. Actually, the face of this black pearl is quite pleasing to the eye. It has obvious Asian characteristics and is not very black. It may be a mixed-race person, or maybe a tanned yellow person. The wheat-colored skin is too much for Li Run's appetite, but his hairstyle is too avant-garde. Li Run's can't accept it. What are you looking at? Black Pearl felt her gaze and asked in an unfriendly tone, clearly feeling a bit unhappy. Li Run's quickly replied, nothing, sorry, and then went back to the room, really not wanting to smell outside for a while longer. Black Pearl was a bit surprised. It's been years since she met someone so calm and composed. Without even uttering the words of the argument in his stomach, he watched Li Run sneak back into the room. It's quite interesting, Black Pearl thought to herself. After Li Run's return to the house, he sat on the sofa and held the metal headband that seemed to be a surreal dream in his hand to examine it. After fiddling with it for a while, he felt that it still didn't work, and even pressing it on his head didn't change. Finally, place it next to your buttocks and use your arm to sweep all the messy garbage on the table to the ground. Looking at this bag, Li Run's thought to himself, why do these people like to smoke by relying on this trash can? Do you want to borrow the smell of garbage if you don't smoke enough? I don't understand. Li Run's quickly drove the idea out of his mind, let's eat first. 5. Chengzhai. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It's not difficult to open this packaging, but it feels so cold. Li Run's stood up and glanced around. In the middle of the wall cabinet between the wardrobe and the glass door, he saw something similar to a microwave oven. Open the door with your mind, place the bag on the tray, and then close the door. This microwave oven started heating itself. Originally, Li Run's had to consider how long it would be appropriate to heat it up. It seems that I am still overthinking. This thing is quite intelligent. Why don't we go take a look at that computer first? Li Run's thought. Pull out the office chair and instinctively search for the mouse, then suddenly realize that it may be driven by consciousness. Then Li Run's tried it with his mind and the screen lit up as expected. I'm not used to this operation, but I'll become proficient by trying it out. Li Run's opened the message page and it was indeed very different from the content in Cyberpunk games, with a blue striped border and a black background. It's all junk mail, gel, steel cannon, gambling and viruses in your computer. I looked around and there was no valuable content. Flipping back to the online page, Li Run's clicked on Simple Real Estate and saw two prominent green characters flashing in the middle. There are 24 days left until the next rent payment. 1,000 euros per month. Paid, Li Run's instantly felt pressure on himself. We still need to make money. Just as Li Run's was sighing, a line of words suddenly appeared in front of him. Heating. Completed. Li Run's realized that the pancake had been heated up. After pinching the top bag and putting it on the table, Li Run's rubbed his hands eagerly. I tried holding the bag with my hand and realized that it wasn't really hot. Li Run's had some doubts about whether he had heated it through. Looking at the chicken-like mashed potatoes and the white sauce inside, he still grabbed the pancake and took a bite. Then Li Run's was a bit unhappy. At least it cost me 11 euros. Why is the taste so average? Cakes are synthetic, chicken is also synthetic, vegetables are also synthetic, and even salad oil is synthetic. After taking one bite, one can only taste a faint chicken flavor and salty taste, which is outrageously plain. But fortunately, he is well managed. But Lee Runs is still not very satisfied. After swallowing 3 bites in 2, Lee Runs thought for a moment and sat back in front of the computer, trying to search for knowledge about Night City. I searched for a while but couldn't find out where the search page was. The only information you can access through a computer is the official website, 2 news stations in Night City, and websites for buying cars and houses. Tut, in his mother 2023, there will be TikTok Kwai Station B. It has been 2077 years, and there is no browser. Lee Runs roast. Immediately, a terrifying idea returned to his mind. Is there a possibility that this is to grasp people's thoughts? Good guy, seemingly giving you freedom, in reality it's just giving you the freedom to choose from the options he provides. Isn't this any better than 1984? What is the significance of knowing so much about this limited information? Lee Runs turned off his computer, stared at it for a moment, and then decided to go out and explore on his own. So far, the farthest range of my activities has been to that vending machine. How can I still live up to my personal image? First, tidy up the room. Lee Runs has been picking up bottles, cans, and garbage bags for a long time. This big room doesn't even have a broom. The jar was crushed flat, and the bags were clumped together and stuffed into a large bag. Open the door and head to the hallway. The black pearl is also missing this time, and no one is smoking there. Lee Runs casually threw away the garbage and began to scrutinize it. Looking to the left, there happened to be a man with bare arms walking in from there, and he walked in the direction of that person. Now, having bare arms is no longer considered a strange attire for him. Stepping through a sliding iron mesh door, I walked out of the corridor, and the sound suddenly became noisy. It is indeed an export. There is an elevator in the front left, and Lee Runs knows that thing. There are annoying advertisements in the elevator. In front of him was a large building. Lee Runs took a few more steps forward and leaned against the cement fence. He looked around and finally saw the building clearly. To be precise, this is a residential building resembling a large chimney, and the opposite building and the building under my feet are actually just a wall of this chimney. Actually, this place is more like Kowloon City Fortress. It's much more spacious and modern than the Kowloon walled city in the movie. There are also many neon lights hanging inside the chimney, and it seems that the lower floor is crowded with people, as if there are shops. There seems to be a white light above, with the sun. Lee Runs reached out to look and realized that it was just a huge lamp. Even sunlight is artificial. Occasionally, there was a loud explosion carrying echoes echoing through the well, sounding like gunshots. Each time, it could cool Lee Runs back, whose nerves had been repeatedly stirred, but the pedestrians around him remained calm. On the right front is a downward staircase. Lee Runs first tried the elevator and saw the red lettering, "Damaged," on it. He chose to take the staircase for a stroll. Walking down the stairs, there is a woman sitting against the stairs, and a man standing opposite is shouting loudly, "We can move out this year if we keep the money." The woman calmly took a sip of her cigarette and replied, "Anyway, there's still another year ahead." Lee Runs didn't continue to look, but forced himself to remain calm and continue moving forward. There were quite a few people on this level. A cement guardrail was removed, and a couple sat in the vacant spot, legs hanging in the abyss, kissing each other passionately without paying any attention to the gaze of others. There was a chubby black old lady walking behind with her bare upper body and hands on her back, and no one was looking at her anyway. The old lady has a very enjoyable expression. Is it to enjoy this coolness or this immoral pleasure? Only she knows. There is a dazzling orange neon light at the corner further forward, which looks like a store. Lee Runs walked over, skipping the drug addicts dancing on the ground under another set of vending machines, passing through a pair of men shouting at each other next to electronic female celebrity idea posters. At the end of the corner, I finally saw the whole picture here, which was full of shops. The restaurant I just saw is a Chinese restaurant. The American-style Chinese food in 2077 city is sour and sweet chicken skewers, braised tofu, and stir-fried noodles. It smells good, but Lee Runs has already eaten enough. Next to him was a popcorn seller, and next to him was a monk, wearing a bamboo hat and a semi-covered gas mask in red and green, selling pottery jars and authentic Chinese porcelain. On the iron table, there was also a decent incense burner with a stick inserted, and the boss's mouth exuded a Japanese-Chinese flavor. Leaving here to continue shopping, I suddenly saw a group of old men who were tinkering with iron. This is a square field, with cement chairs placed on the cement floor. The orange neon lights at the American-style Chinese restaurant next to them shone brightly on the sweat of these people. There are scattered fitness equipment and a pile of cement dumbbells stacked in the corner. Before I could get close, I could ask for a strong smell of sweat, but there was no sour smell. Just a glance can infect you with this atmosphere. Lee Runs suddenly felt like he had seen this place somewhere before. After careful consideration for a while, Lee Runs suddenly remembered, isn't this the place where V took on the task? Am I in the same building as V? Can it be said that I am actually in the game and have a system on me? Lee Runs, who was skeptical, followed his memory and found the black man among a group of muscular men who were sweating and smelling all over. A meat mountain that looks like a Japanese sumo wrestler just puts a barbell that looks like a giant his mother on the ground, and a loud bang startles Lee Runs again. The cans on the nearby shelf were all shaken down, and the cans were sprinkled with green water all over the ground, with bubbles still rising on the ground. The white man next to him, who was raising a dumbbell, let out a roar. You pay me for my drink. This bottle costs €5. This roar almost caught up with the landing of the Hulk barbell. After hesitating for a moment, Lee Runs forced out a smiling face and mustered the courage to step forward and talk to the black man who was doing dumbbell curls. Hello, buddy. The black man put down the dumbbell, took a deep breath, and wiped the sweat beads on his head. After seeing Lee Runs' smiling face, he looked up and down again, and finally replied with a blank expression, yeah, what's that? Lee Runs didn't mean he couldn't understand me, mainly because he didn't know why he could understand what I was saying. Moreover, my English proficiency is just like that. If communication becomes more complicated, I may pause on the spot and make some misunderstandings to get beaten up, which would be disastrous. Oh, there is a translation plugin. Lee Runs activated the translation plugin with a thought. The West Coast accent of the black guy turned into a lively Mandarin. Then Lee Runs became bolder. Excuse me, do you have any tasks for me? Black guy has a black question mark on his face. 6. Make a name for yourself. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Task. Looking at the black man with increasingly confused eyes, Lee Runs began to feel a bit anxious. Is there any job for me? The kind that pays. The black man's eyes became strange. After looking at Lee Runs again, he politely said, if you're a mercenary, shouldn't you go find a middleman? I see you speak so politely, with this expression on your face. Forgive me for being blunt, you really don't seem like a mercenary. I do have a boxing event here, and you look quite strong. Maybe you can do it. Lee Runs hesitated for a moment and said, can I give it a try? The black man raised his hand and pointed to a paralyzed training robot in the corner. Sure, see that. Practicing with him won't hurt you much. If you want to give it a try, I'll tell them not to practice for now and make room for you. The robot is covered in red mats all over its body, wrapped around the wires and steel bones inside. Its eyes are two simple red light bulbs, making it look even more playful than the old man in the bathrobe. Appearing harmless to humans and animals. Do you have any requirements? Lee Runs observed the robot and turned his head to ask Black Brother. €20. Everyone comes for this price. No one is allowed to use knives, guns, mantis knives, or single-molecule threads. Black Brother sat on a cement chair, picked up a soda bottle of the same design as White Brother and brought it to his mouth. After smacking the green liquid in his mouth, he said lightly, "Isn't it reasonable to charge some fees? I spent a lot of money on this thing." The guys pooled together to buy it, and 20 euros is just enough for a meal. "Look at how neatly you dress, can't you come up with it?" Looking at Li Run's silent expression, Black Brother seemed to suddenly remember something. Put down the jar and look up at him, saying, "Oh, you're out of work. Let's do it then. I'll set you to second mode, similar to a beginner. If you win, you don't have to pay. How about that?" Li Runs also felt that there was probably no such thing as a task system, and according to the plot in the novel, there should have been one already. But Li Runs really wants to see the combat effectiveness of beginners in Night City. Although Li Runs never even glanced at the gun in his past life, he still knows a little bit of martial arts. "Inheriting my father's brave and aggressive temperament, I have been fighting since childhood and gradually fell silent in high school because entering a top-tier class requires me to be like a good child. Looking at my mother's joyful expression as I entered the top class, I secretly decided to settle down for 3 years, and it wouldn't be good to get kicked out of the fight again. I started giving takeout food to support my family in college, but only then did I realize that I had caused a lot of trouble for my family before, so I restrained myself a bit. But although there is less practice, theoretical knowledge is not too short. Fighting a professional boxer is definitely not enough, it's easy to beat a thug." I immediately said something to Black Brother, "Deal." Black Brother nodded slightly and suddenly revealed 2 rows of teeth. He smiled and said, "That's settled." Then he stood up and clapped his hands. A few seconds later, the men and women around him who were tinkling stopped their work and looked towards him. Black Brother raised his hands high and shouted, "Stop practicing, stop practicing. Make room, make room. The person next to me." Black Brother turned his head and asked, "What's your name?" "Li Runs." "Mr. Li Runs. Can I call you Mr.?" Old Black turned his head and asked him again. Li Runs was taken aback for a moment, not expecting such a problem, but the thought that this was the City of Night relieved him. "Sure. Mr. Li Runs, come to the arena of playing Little Red Chili Peppers." The faces of the men and women who were originally not very satisfied with being interrupted and masturbating all showed some mixed joy and surprise. They began to communicate quietly with each other, but Li Runs couldn't hear clearly. The 2 sumo wrestlers who were originally arguing in the Big White Bear shook hands very smoothly and made peace, then together they lifted the push bench and stood next to them, bared their big teeth, staring at Li Runs foolishly. Scattered people wearing sportswear also came to help clean up the venue. Black Brother strode into a sports backpack and didn't know what he was flipping through. Li Runs, who was originally quite confident, lost confidence in this scene. "How do you feel like you've been tricked?" The more people gathered around him, Li Runs felt a bit scared. "My palms have become slightly damp, and my heart is beating faster. Black Brother has returned with a black tattoo on his neck. Come next to me." Black Brother sent a text message to Li Runs, which was displayed in his eyes. Li Runs had this novel experience for the first time, and he clearly didn't need to reply. But he still replied to Black Brother under the guise of his reply, "Okay, I actually want to try sending text messages." Then the Big White Bear lifted a 170-pound chili pepper with his left hand and leaned in front of him. With his right index finger and thumb, he pinched the chip taken from Old Black's hand and used his little thumb to pry off the robot's head pad, inserting it into the slot on his forehead, and then covered the pad back. "Are you okay? Your heartbeat is a bit abnormal." Lao He sent another text message to Li Runs. Li Runs looked at Lao He in surprise. Is his hearing so sensitive? Reply. "I'm fine, thank you." Little Chili's eyes lit up. The Big White Bear released its left hand upon seeing this, and the small chili peppers landed steadily on the ground. Walking at a very steady and arrogant pace to the other side of Old Black. Old Black grabbed Lee Run's hand with his left hand and the robot's hand with his right hand, shouting loudly. "Alright, ladies and gentlemen, as well as you of all genders, the two sides of the upcoming competition are Mr. Lee Run's facing second-grade chili peppers. When the market opens, hurry up and give it 2 minutes to pass without waiting." Lee Run's was a bit stunned. Does this club rely on it to make money? Old Black once again commanded the members of the club to resist the cement fence next to the opposite building as a cage wall. A regular octagonal shape was arranged along the octagonal pattern on the ground, enclosing Lee Run's and Xiao Chili inside. Obviously, this is not the first time. Lee Run's finally knew why there was no guardrail in the place where those kissing couples were sitting. Lee Run's, who was covered in black lines, felt that he had overestimated the moral standards of the residents of Night City. 2 minutes of noise quickly passed. Watching the little chili peppers retreat to the corner of the cement octagonal cage, Yu reading www.yuyukangshu.net, Lee Run's heart pounded and he also retreated to the opposite corner of the octagonal cage. This person's hands are shaking. Can they do it? Sharp-eyed viewers noticed Lee Run's abnormality. There was another commotion below, and Lee Run's turned around to find that there were already quite a few people gathered. No wonder you need to take the railing from the opposite building. If you take it from here, 1 or 2 people will definitely fall off. Lee Run's doesn't really care, it's called a battle escape reaction, it's a talent. Tipping is because I'm secreting adrenaline while brushing. The adrenaline quickly dispelled the timid feeling in his heart. I feel a surge of courage swimming up my kidneys, crawling over my back and neck, finally splitting into 2 streams. One stream flows into my shoulder to support it, while the other rushes into my mind and heads straight towards my scalp. With the loud roar of the heart, the limbs quickly became lighter, and waving 2 fists casually felt very smooth. A group of 2077 old folks who don't understand anything, today I'll give you a hard look. After practical and rigorous training, Lee Run's has already mastered this impulse proficiently. Not only does it not affect the fight at all, but it can also relieve the pain. Watching Lee Run's retreat to the corner of the octagonal cage, Old Black opened his voice in the midst of the noisy crowd, in a physical sense. The extra black stripe sandwiched between the left and right stripes unfolded to the left and right, revealing a black, sound-like object. Under the neon lights of the orange-yellow American-style Chinese restaurant, the exposed metal parts of the chili pepper sparkle. Looking at Lee Run's, who was full of war and had a firm gaze. Old Black raised his hands and opened his mouth in the midst of the noisy crowd, shouting. 3, 2, 1. Fight. 7. Great War. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lee Run's took off his glasses and placed them on the cement railing, while Lao He stepped forward to put them away. Ding ding ding, the piercing sound of the big bell rang, and the audience erupted in cheers. That was also the sound effect stored in Old Black's throat, which had not been there since 2077. Xiao Chili took the lead in setting up the standard boxing posture in place, with a nimble posture that did not resemble the robot that Lee Run's had in mind. The overall posture is slightly forward-leaning, which is the path of American boxing. Lee Run's chose to show his hand to the local old hats of 2077 in another time and space. Although we are not some martial arts experts, we inherited the boxing techniques used by our father when he started his family. He has been practicing hard in school for so many years, and how can't we still defeat him with a fresh hand? Take a few steps forward and reach the middle of the arena. To play the octagonal cage, you must first grab the center. If pressed on the periphery, the person in the center will take 1 step, while the person on the periphery will have to take 2 or 3 steps, and their stamina will quickly run out. UFC Lee Run's has also seen it. Then lean your left leg forward a bit without leaning your center of gravity, and bend your right leg slightly to bear all the weight. After crossing the 2 ribs towards the chest with both hands, flip the palm of the right hand downwards, and continue to move upwards with the left hand until it reaches the position of the left elbow at the fingertip of the right hand. The upper arm and lower arm should be at an angle of 150 degrees, and the left hand should be at an angle of approximately 45 degrees upward from the horizontal plane behind the palm, pressing on the center line. Start a virtual step palm probing technique with the 8 extremes fist. Advance can be attacked and retreat can be defended, but Lee Runs believes it's better not to underestimate the enemy. The flashing light in front of Xiaoqili may be searching for something. The audience was left somewhat silent by this strange appearance, and Black Brother was afraid of the silence. Seeing this, he immediately pretended to be surprised and moved his voice to shout loudly. "I'm Zhua, it's Bushido X. I've seen that karate movie." The audience became lively again. Lee Runs was a bit unhappy, but still didn't say anything. Xiaoqili seemed to have not found anything, so she chose to hold on to her posture and search for flaws around the edge of the cage. Lee Run's direction also followed him, not wanting to give him a chance. So the little chili pepper leaned forward, reached a safe distance, and took a step with its left leg to test it. Lee Runs remained motionless, but his gaze remained fixed on the little chili pepper, maintaining a high level of vigilance. The little chili peppers bounced and took a few more probing steps, then fiercely swept low and kicked Lee Run's left leg as he stepped forward. Lee Runs noticed his low sweep forward shake, quickly retracted his left leg, and then made a virtual stride back, returning to a virtual step to explore his palm and successfully dodged the blow. This is the advantage of having the center of gravity at the back, as the front out part can be quickly recovered. The onlookers, Big White Bear and Sumo Brother, saw this scene and immediately withdrew their exposed big teeth along with the foolish smile on their faces. I suddenly feel that this posture is a bit interesting. Xiaoqili saw that she couldn't sweep low and then retreated to a safe distance. Then, contrary to common sense, she quickly took a step forward with both feet in the second bouncing pattern of her right leg sweeping low and returning to her original position, and her left hand punched her with a jab. The small chili peppers are indeed incredibly fast, but in reality, this move is longer than the low sweep and easier to dodge. Lee Runs instinctively felt that he had another move when he saw him punching. After effortlessly avoiding this piercing punch, he did indeed receive a right-handed straight punch from Xiaoqili. A standard yet very fast forward and backward straight combo. With this sudden burst of punching speed, if we didn't use the virtual step to explore the palm, Lee Runs might have eaten it. But Su Butan palm is really not afraid of this. Lee Runs quickly pulled back the palm that had previously been stuck in the midline and clenched his fist in front of him. At the same time, the slight bending of the right leg suddenly straightened out, and with the force of the right leg kicking the ground, the center moved forward as a whole, and the left leg became a solid cross from a virtual one. The palm with the right hand across the chest is also clenched and lifted. Xiaoqili's fist was already close to her face, and she might have had a concussion on the spot from this one. But Lee Runs has basically completed it, with his left punch striking from the midline to the left, just missed the right punch that the little chili pepper towards him. At the same time, the fist lifted by the right hand slammed forward with the momentum of the center of gravity, and even made a small spin in the air to increase the speed of the fist. With a thud, Xiaoqili received a heavy punch on the red pad on her left chin and took a few steps back. Lee Runs habitually took a step back, according to his experience, it should be over. Then little Chili was like a drunken person, slowly retracting her right hand to her side and walking unsteadily for 2 steps. Oh! What? Did it end so quickly? It's boring now. A blue light flashed in Old Black's eyes, and then the sumo wrestler's face changed, and a blue light also flashed in his eyes. Xiaoqili stumbled back 2 steps into a safe distance and then pretended to fall. Lee Runs felt that the situation had been decided and put away his arms. Looking at Black Brother with a questioning gaze, but coincidentally in the second half of Black Brother's eyes shining blue, Lee Runs felt like he was mistaken. Anyway, Black Brother ignored him. The light bulb of little Chili's eyes flickered again. After trembling, the speed of light returned to boxing and fighting, and then a brisk step forward, with a set of straight, swinging, and hooking strokes, flowing vigorously in sinking. When Lee Runs noticed that the chili peppers were not poured, they had already rushed forward halfway. It is impossible to restore the support frame. Oh! Shocking cries came from the audience. A faint, "huh," was drowned in the sea of people. Lee Runs could only dodge a straight punch on his side and then move backwards to dodge a Russian-style swing, but unfortunately did not dodge. Zayakhili's fist hit his cheekbones, making a muffled sound. Lee Run's position had an unstable center of gravity, and he was hit again, uncontrollably falling backwards. Cheers came from the audience, and behind the cheers came scattered laughter of poor taste. Then, due to the imbalance, the chin happened to rub against the hook of the little chili pepper, benefiting from misfortune and danger. Lee Run's eyes were a bit starry, and he took a big breath before getting up and retreating. He leaned against the cement fence and put on the same boxing posture to guard against the little chili peppers. This move is actually deceiving Xiao Chili. He doesn't know anything except for a hug, and if he can hold on until he recovers, he will be considered victorious. The dancing homeless man in the audience was waving his hands and shouting loudly. The smell on his body was not particularly pleasing, and he cleared an area around him with both hands in one fell swoop. Sure enough, Xiao Chili didn't want to miss this good opportunity to fall to the ground. He stepped forward and took a mid-sweep, but still kicked Lee Run's left front leg. He couldn't dodge and was kicked solidly, causing his center of gravity to become unstable. Xiao Chili punched him in the nose, lost his center of gravity, and then took a few steps back in a disorderly manner. When he regained his composure, he regained his grip. Now Lee Runs began to sweat, feeling a bit confused and his heart pounded like a big drum. The chili peppers began to bounce. At any moment, another stepping forward could come over. Lee Runs also chose to take a gamble, although his posture of becoming weak and probing his palms may be beaten at this time, there is nothing he can do. Lee Runs also bounced along, pretending to adjust his breathing, and then made a feint with a jab before quickly switching gears. Xiao Chili did indeed follow the routine and quickly went to shoot Lee Run's jab, only to see Lee Runs switch sides while he was defending. I don't know if the personality plugin has been installed, but Zayakhili's actions give a feeling of being deceived. Little chili peppers irrationally thrust back and forth at Lee Runs once again. This time, Lee Runs dared not underestimate the enemy, fearing that Xiao Chili was trying to reverse his routine and adopt a new approach. Lee Runs withdrew his jab as usual, then clenched his left hand to retract his straight fist. At this moment, I suddenly noticed that the little chili pepper's punch had started to recover and was approaching the center line. Lee Runs understood now that this was trying to block my backhand punch. You're really lying to me. Fortunately, I saved a hand. The robot of 2077 is really cunning, but his killing move this time was not done with his right hand. You blocked a loneliness. Lee Runs took a strong breath and bent his left arm back a bit, then clenched his right arm and swung it backwards. Then the footsteps also changed from a virtual leap to a solid leap, taking advantage of this momentum and using the retracted left arm to hit the top elbow. UU reading www.uukangshu.net in the heart of the little chili pepper. Xiao Chili took 2 steps back directly, then lost its center of gravity and fell to the ground. Zayakhili's eyes turned blue, which is a sign of giving up. The audience was filled with enthusiastic cheers and urgent screams and curses. Yeah, you're so handsome. That's it. Little Chili, stand up, I bet my money his mother. Black Brother, who had come to his senses, felt that he was getting faster. He was once again thinking about giving Little Chili Pepper a resurrection coin, but as he watched the blue light turn on, everyone probably saw it. It was not worth spending 20 euros with his face. I had no choice but to hit the big bell 3 more times with my throat. Lee Runs was panting heavily, he hadn't exercised like this in years. But I still dare not put down the arms, afraid that the little chili will give me a little surprise again. Looking at little Chili's blue eyes, Li Runs was confused. Then Li Runs heard 3 clang-clang sounds from Black Brother's side, and felt that it should be over. But after thinking about it for a while, I still dare not put down my arms. What if some tasteless person in the audience also made a recording in this joke? Until Black Brother walked onto the ring amidst cheers and said to Li Runs, "Relax, it's over." Li Runs finally relaxed and lowered his head, supported his legs with both hands, taking deep breaths. Sweat cascaded down my hair. Black Brother took out his eyes and tried it on his own, then returned it to Li Runs. Flat light. Xiao Chili stood up again and walked to Black Brother's side, and Li Runs followed him in coarse clothing. As he walked unsteadily towards Lao He, a thought suddenly came to his mind. Is there no V from the beginning? Or am I the V? 8. Good morning, Night City. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lao He grabbed both hands and raised his voice. The winner is Li Runs. Li Runs' hand was raised by Lao He, and the scene was filled with even more enthusiastic cheers and whistles, as well as faint sighs that were drowned out by people. The orange neon light shone on Li Runs' face, and Li Runs' sweat also emitted a faint light, but it was masked by the stronger neon light, like the sound of sighs and sighs. Li Runs' chest heaved and he took deep breaths. After Lao He put down Li Runs' hand, Li Runs felt that he had adjusted almost enough and found a cement chair to sit down. The crowd slowly dispersed after a commotion, and some unlucky people exclaimed that they had lost something. But Li Runs didn't have the leisure to take care of it. After a while, Lao He followed and handed Li Runs a bottle of the same style of soda. Li Runs said thank you and picked it up with his hand. Oh my, it's cold. Suddenly, he looked at Lao He with an extra thank you in his eyes. This drink is free, you can rest assured to drink it. Li Runs realized that he had to think about whether this thing would cost money before taking it. Sure enough, the brain is a bit overheated. Old Black continued to say, you're really good at fighting, have you ever modified it? Li Runs thought for a moment and said, there shouldn't be. Should I? I have lost some memories, but as far as I know, I have not been modified, and I have not found any modification on me. Oh. Lao He nodded. My name is Fred. Are you interested in joining our club? You don't need to pay a membership fee to win the second-level chili. Li Runs thought for a moment again. What are the benefits of joining a club? Fred said, can we waive the cost of our fitness equipment here? Is this okay? Actually, I wanted to ask before, what's the use of exercising in the night city? I feel like this world is filled with bangs, and even if you practice solidly, it's just a matter of bangs. Li Runs took another sip of a refreshing drink, like a mixture of apple-flavored Fanta and Magic Claw, which was indescribably strange, but it wasn't difficult to taste just a few more sips. Fred shook his head and said, it seems you have lost a lot of memory. The most powerful weapon in Night City is not a gun, but a righteous body. Only the stronger the body and the stronger the willpower, can more righteous bodies be supported. Li Runs felt that Fred had no reason to deceive him and nodded to accept this statement. Then I'll join. Fred patted him on the shoulder and added, we're different from those crazy dogs from Animal Help. They exercise for their lives, and we exercise for the sake of living longer and for our hobbies. We also have some small benefits. I can get you this soda at half price. Not bad, right? Li Runs' eyes lit up, this is really great. This attracts me a lot more than that fitness equipment, why didn't you say it earlier? Suddenly realizing that he was no longer panting, Li Runs looked at his body and then at the cola, looking a bit incredulous. Fred chuckled and said, who knew you were such a mouthful? Everyone else joined just for the sake of equipment. Oh, by the way, the statistics have been completed. This is your dividend. As Fred and Li Runs' eyes lit up simultaneously, Li Runs realized that his balance had increased by 300 euros. What about dividends? Li Runs asked. If you don't join, it's gone. Fred chuckled and his eyes lit up again. Originally, Lee Runs wanted to ask them how much they earned, but upon reflection, they probably wouldn't tell the truth, and asking would hurt their feelings. I just held it back. Some of the profits are already good. This is the address of a ED doctor, who is quite hidden, so the bid will be cheaper, but his skills are very good. If you quote my name, you can get a few hundred cheaper. This is more valuable than drinks, Lee Runs thought to himself. Then he stood up and patted his pants, saying, "Can we still compete recently? There won't be any matches recently, please feel free to contact me if there's anything." Fred didn't stop him as he was about to leave, as he had already said everything. Lee Runs continued to stroll on this floor and found that it was already the end after passing a corner. At the end of the corner, there was a shooting range selling guns. No wonder the residents of this city village ignored these gunshots. Lee Runs walked up to the door and saw, "Good guy. The cheapest pistol costs €400, and one bullet costs €2. After thinking about his shallow family background and the prices of the night city, Lee Runs felt that even if he had a gun, he couldn't do the robbery work. Not buying a gun may not necessarily lead to death, but buying it will definitely starve to death. Shaking his head, he turned around and took the elevator straight to the bottom of the building, which was almost the same as the one above. But there weren't so many people, the stalls were full, and the fragrant and smelly smell mixed together, making my head feel a bit sore. Lee Runs understands why people in the night city like to wear half-face masks. After passing another corner, Lee Runs finally saw what the street looked like. Before stepping out of this building, the sound of cars passing by and the noise of crowds on the street could be heard endlessly. After stepping out of the building, Lee Runs' heart inexplicably widened. Immediately followed were more noisy noises and intense neon light pollution. Lee Runs squinted his eyes for a while before slowly opening them, not pretending to be deep, but really shaking his eyes. The zebra crossing on the street is projected, and what is projected on the ground is only light, not afraid of being worn out. Standing next to him was something that looked like a traffic light, which looked very high-tech, but Lee Runs stared at him for a while but couldn't see any functional difference from the traffic lights in his previous life. Surrounded by buildings with a gray-white background, there isn't as much glass at the bottom because we need to give way to neon lights. People are walking densely on the sidewalk, with various strange symbols shining with neon lights. Some of them have their heads down like walking corpses, while others are clutching certain parts of their bodies and limping in pain. Occasionally, a few people dressed brightly like peacocks, holding a cigarette in their hands, shook their heads 3 times a step, and proudly walked through the crowd. It is not difficult to see that for them, walking in this way is much more addictive than taking drugs. Large glowing billboards kept emitting various vulgar male and female gasping and brainwashing sounds that stimulated the nerves. Looking up, I didn't see the sky. Instead, there were various buildings like branches extending horizontally from other skyscrapers and connecting to another one. It's like a bridge or a blood vessel. Connected the top floors of the entire night city together. Lee Runs took a few more steps forward and looked up to see the sun in the sky. Compared to these neon lights and mirrors, the light of the sun had to be slightly behind. UU reading www.uukangshu.net. What is eye health and what is light pollution? The company doesn't care about this, it only cares if you remember their advertisements. Selling your waist for surgery when your eyes are broken is not a big deal in the eyes of the big boss. A group of lowly and despicable people like mice dare to brag and scream, "Be careful not to accidentally harm you in the next mercenary operation." We are all people who strive for fairness and uprightness. Who says you don't work hard enough? Didn't you have a good father after working hard in your previous life? Unreasonable. A gust of hot wind carrying a hint of sand and dust blew over, bringing a pure and slightly sweet industrial atmosphere to Lee Run's face. Perhaps this also comes with a fee, right? If not charged, it may be toxic. Lee Runs thought to himself, but he didn't hide from the hot wind. Allow this refreshing sweetness to seep into his nose. The owner of the nearby snack stand was pinned to the ground by two uniformed personnel with blue arrows on their heads, crying and writhing incessantly. On the screen of the booth, a passionate male voice came through. "Good morning, Night City. Yesterday's dead man lottery, the final result was a perfect 30. Thanks to endless gang conflicts, Haywood alone hung 10. But one police officer also hung up. I see you all have to lose money because NCPD definitely can't swallow this. There is another power outage in Santo Domingo. The power grid was damaged by people, and it was also a good thing done by network hackers. At the same time, Westbrook's trauma team is still collecting corpses for victims of cybermania on the sidewalk. And in Taiping Prefecture. Well, Taiping Prefecture is still that same. I am your buddy Stan. Let's start a new day in the Dream City with me." 9. Conspiracy. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Lee Runs looked at the busy and shining but lifeless street in front of him. The openness in his heart was shrouded in an inexplicable sense of loss, and he didn't know where to go. Then just take a walk, Lee Runs thought to himself. He glanced to the right and noticed a downward step across the street. The alley below the step seemed very lively. So Lee Runs began to walk over and wait for the traffic lights, and within a few seconds, he focused his gaze on several tracks. Lee Runs felt uncomfortable for a while before realizing that he also had to do as the Romans do. Then he boldly stepped on the zebra crossing, his heart twitching slightly. After crossing the road, Lee Runs quietly looked left and right. This is the rule of passage in the Night City. Suddenly, I felt another inexplicable fatigue on my body, and my limbs were sore. Walking was a bit shaky. He speculated that the green energy drink might have been too effective. The exhaustion of boxing surged back with a surge of anger. Although I still want to stroll around, my brain and body are fiercely protesting. So we'll have to start by wronging ourselves. Lee Runs crawled back into the building and took the elevator back to his own floor. Walking up to my own door, I saw the black pearl smoking next to the trash can in the dim light. Although I quite like this black pearl skin bag, I don't want to warm my face and stick it to someone's cold buttocks. Nodding slightly, he headed straight to his own door. Hey, you played well. Upon hearing a familiar voice, Lee Runs turned around and saw that it was the Black Pearl. It's okay, isn't it? Lee Runs was really tired. Black Pearl completely ignored the tiredness in Lee Runs' voice and said, My name is Ollie Grayler, you can also call me Sichin. My name is Lee Runs, I already know. The fitness worker called out your name, and the people on this floor probably know you. Maybe everyone in this building has heard of you. Black Pearl stomped out her cigarette butt and looked at Lee Runs, who was silent, and said. Alright, you go rest first. Turn around and leave. Lee Runs returned to the room with an inexplicable expression on his face. The people of Night City really have personalities. Ah, the smell of sweat all over my body. Struggling to hold back the pain, my whole body quickly stripped naked and then went into the shower to take a cool shower. I was originally planning to find a towel to wipe it, but the water on my body dried up in about 10 seconds. It's quite interesting. The novel discovery slightly stirred his nerves and gave him a shallow boost of energy. But the effect passed quickly. Leaving the shower, he fell on the bed, lifted the blanket, and crawled in. This time, I slept until I woke up naturally. Lying in bed, Lee Runs had an idea to open the blinds and see the sky. It's already dark. I suddenly remembered that I should have a built-in clock. With a sudden thought, there was indeed something. It's already 8 p.m. For the night owls and men and women seeking pleasure in the Night City, their day has just begun. Getting up from bed and walking to the wardrobe, Lee Runs looked at himself naked in the mirror. He felt as if he was sick. Why should he look at his own fruit, and also at others? I changed into a loose pair of orange-yellow pants with a gradient up and down, put on a black shirt with a broken white note, and put on a brown leather jacket with red stripes on the shoulders. Looking at myself in the mirror, I feel pretty good, but I feel like I've forgotten something. He thought for a moment, then remembered the spring waistband, which he flipped out and put on his waist. I'm ready to go out now. Lee Runs returned to the place where he had stopped at that time, feeling that there was not much difference between the night city at night and the night city during the day. It's all intense light pollution, and places that shouldn't see light still can't see light. There are more police officers in the patrol team. They are wearing blue uniforms and black bulletproof vests, with a tactical belt on black pants, black brimmed hats, and black-toed sunglasses. The blue arrow on the head is displayed in the eyes of every resident of Night City, which can be considered as a police officer's certificate hanging outside. What sunglasses do you wear at night? Maybe it's covering your face. After all, the police also have to leave work, and the police also have family members. Besides, with the light pollution of Night City, wearing sunglasses at any time is not outrageous. Lee Runs learned from passers-by and leaned against the railing next to the steps. Looking at the scenery of Night City, pedestrians, cars, advertisements, and lights, listening to the conversations and complaints of the residents of Night City, the roar of cars, the music of advertisements, and the clanging sound of construction coming from somewhere unknown, there is also a familiar smell of sour and sweet chicken, accompanied by the smell of dust and the smell of sewage. This is where I want to live. Sigh. Sighed. That's enough, let's continue browsing. Standing in front of the stairs, Lee Runs was about to go down when he saw a white guy bending over and running out from under the stairs, shouting in tears while running, "Why the hell am I? Why is it me?" Then suddenly there was a gunshot. The nearby citizens probably guessed something and followed, crying and running in all directions, even though they hadn't seen anything yet. But this is a necessary skill for survival in the Night City. Lee Runs doesn't know what happened. He has never encountered such a thing. Forget it, let's run first, and then follow the steps and run down. The police around were old-timers. They immediately realized that someone else had done something. They immediately took out their pistols and formed a team and trotted together to seize the bunker. Then slowly touch forward. In no time, around 20 police officers gathered and surrounded the alley below the stairs on the inner and outer floors. The police force of Night City, which has undergone numerous trials and tribulations, is different. Seeing more and more police officers gathered around, it seems that something is not quite right. Why are you surrounded? I didn't do anything. I haven't experienced such a thing before, so I feel like it's better to find a place to hide first. Turning around, he suddenly met the gaze of a yellow-haired Mexican thug wearing a mask that was as bright as a caterpillar. Originally, behind this staircase, just now I felt that there is still quite a lot of space below the place in Night City, and there are also many stalls here. Some thugs are robbing the small stall here, and this caterpillar is trying to stop the white guy who was running for his life. He even fired a shot when he couldn't catch up, but bending down to escape bullets has become a passive skill for the people of Night City. This shot was shot empty, but I happened to see Lee Runs colliding like a fool. The thug directly pulled out a pistol and aimed it at him. Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net, I'll count 5, get over here. Lee Runs hesitated for a moment before obediently raising his hands and going over. 7 steps away, the gun is fast. Within 7 steps, the gun is accurate and fast. I don't have the ability to dodge bullets myself, so it's not embarrassing to throw one. A short-haired, skinny monkey thug with black stripes on his face stood silently behind Lee Runs. Finding the right direction is like giving a kick to Lee Runs. Lee Runs was kicked and knocked to the ground. Getting up from the ground and looking back angrily at him. The skinny monkey got up and slapped Lee Runs in the face with a big mouth, then slammed his head with the butt of the gun. With a loud cry, Lee Runs covered his head with his left hand and bent over. Very unhappy, very frustrated, very angry. Unfortunately, no matter how angry he is, he can't be angry enough to hold a gun as a thug. Still obediently squatting with another group of captured residents under the drive of thugs. At this moment, Lee Runs began to look at these thugs. There were 4 people in total, 1 caterpillar, 1 skinny monkey, and 2 large warriors with complete masks and red machetes. The caterpillar poked its head up the stairs and saw a bunch of black hats pointing their guns at it. Then, taking advantage of their lack of reaction, it quickly tightened its grip and retreated. "Yo, Tommy, it seems like we're surrounded by a note." This was also intentionally shouted to the police. The police realized they had been exposed and shouted down directly, "NCPD, you are already surrounded. Quickly raise your hands, put down your weapons, and walk out." The skinny monkey seems to be the boss here, he is the only thug holding a rifle. 2 big men with machetes were motionless facing the prisoners, as if being surrounded had nothing to do with them, and there was no expression on their faces. 10. Danger. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Oh. Ah, a suppressed voice roared out of place. It's a TV advertisement on a booth, promoting legitimate emotions and super dreams. It's a technology of targeted thinking and deep hypnosis that allows you to truly immerse yourself in the protagonist in the first person, feeling every breeze, heartbeat, and pleasure he blows. It is one of the most beloved consumer goods among the poor guys in Night City, and many high-level executives cannot stop admiring it. A strong man with a knife feels that this thing is making some noise. Turning his head to look at the TV, he snorted and continued to stare at the prisoners. The skinny monkey observed his movements and raised his hand and fired 2 shots to smoke the TV. What's so lifeless is that a jump bullet hit a prisoner squatting on the ground in a pile of prisoners. He was wearing brown and red mountain boots, black and white camouflage combat pants, a pure red shirt on his upper body, a black and white leopard print scarf hanging around his neck, and a Churchill round hat with a white gold strap on his head. That shot seemed to have hit his left upper arm, and his red clothes instantly turned a big block black. With his right hand covering his arm, he collapsed on the ground, curling up and wriggling in agony. The Churchill hat also fell to the ground and rolled in circles like a coin. The group of people next to them took another step back. After Lee Runs realized it, he also wanted to retreat, but he sadly found that he had no way out because the group of people next to him had already taken his retreat. The skinny monkey looked up and shouted to the police above, "We have hostages, there are many hostages. Make way for us. Prepare the car for us. You have no hands or feet. Otherwise, tomorrow's WNS News channel will be the Night City Police who killed 4 thugs." The skinny monkey paused, looked at the caterpillar, who understood and turned around to check the heads before shouting, 12. 12 hostages. Make a decision quickly, otherwise we'll lose 1 hostage every 3 minutes. Don't try to drag the mobile team over. We have a repairman. If we find out that your car has been tampered with, I will kill the hostage first. The skinny monkey leaned against the cement wall, holding a rifle and shouting out. Lee Runs didn't know the commotion above, but these 5 minutes gave him a feeling of living like a year, and he had never felt that death was so close to him before. The 2 robbers waited for an extra 2 minutes for some reason, perhaps hoping that the police would change their mind, but they felt that waiting any longer would be seen as a joke. A blue light flashed through the caterpillar's eyes, and then it lifted its pistol and pulled the trigger towards the crowd. A bullet directly pierced through a woman's genitals. Blood splattered on the wall behind her, with a bullet hole embedded in the middle of the bloodstain. The gentle-looking lady collapsed backwards uncontrollably. Ping fell to the ground with a loud bang. The mechanical prosthetic body of both arms made a unique metallic collision sound when it fell to the ground. Blood gushed out from the hole in the head, quickly staining the cement ground red. Her white cotton jacket absorbed the blood from the ground, and her neck turned red all around. The surrounding crowd erupted into another piercing scream, followed by another burst of crying. Lee Runs was also frightened and fell to the ground, shouting and moving backwards with both hands and feet. Although we have fought, who is not afraid of his mother death? The skinny monkey walked forward and grabbed the woman's ponytail, dragged her body to the edge of the shadow, and then kicked it out. The body rolled under the light and up to where the police could see it. Her face, still tinged with a hint of blood, was filled with fear, as silver and purple neon lights were reflected onto her face. Let the police above also have a clear view. In the second 3 minutes of this time, a loud voice could finally be heard from the rustling sound on the steps, similar in volume to Fred's modified voice. The car is ready and we have cleared the road for you. Then the skinny monkey and the caterpillar beckoned 2 strong men to take hostages. The skinny monkey grabbed the Churchill hat, which was accidentally injured by a stray bullet. It was easy to control the injury, and even if the injury was not severe, it could not be counted as his own head. 2 strong men each chose a woman because it was easy to control. The women were all picked away, and originally 3 were killed by themselves. The caterpillar glanced at the trembling Lee Runs and raised its gun towards him. You, get up. Lee Runs was about to burst into tears in an instant, but there was a possibility that he might be kicked out of crying. He could only endure it and obediently stood up on the ground. With both hands raised, the gun pressed against the forehead and was pushed away by the caterpillar. 4 people formed a 4-sided formation, with a hostage blocking in front of them on each side. I moved step by step to the prepared car. A blue light flashed in front of the skinny monkey and the caterpillar, and Lee Runs was pushed in front of him. The skinny monkey immediately pressed the cold muzzle of the gun against Lee Runs' waist. Lee Runs' scalp tightened and he no longer dared to move around. The skinny monkey, 2 strong men, and the car formed a quadrilateral, and the caterpillar hid in the middle of the quadrilateral scanning the car for a while. Then he turned around and greeted the 3 people to get on the car. Lee Runs was also carried onto the car, which was a police escort vehicle. I think it's because I really didn't have time to prepare, so I had to open my own car. 4 hostages and a thin monkey carrying assault rifles sat in the back carriage, with the thin monkey sitting on one side and the 4 hostages on the other. The caterpillar drove, and 2 strong men sat silently in the front and back seats of the car. Then there was a roar and a foot on the accelerator. The escort vehicle with black flashing lights has started. This car has strong power and fast speed. It takes less than 4 minutes to drive out and enters the wasteland. Lee Runs looked around the car and found that the space was very small, surrounded by black, smooth, and frosted walls. The lights in the car are really dim, or in other words, they have been sucked away by the frosted surface. Perhaps this is also a psychological tactic of the police, and this oppressive atmosphere is the first test for criminals. Amidst the rustling sound of the wheels grinding over the sand, the carriage fell into a eerie dullness, and this atmosphere descended upon Lee Runs' side. He decided to find something to do for himself to dispel this panic. So he quietly scrutinized the thin monkey. About 1.7 meters tall, there was a white T-shirt with a red skull printed on it under an open red jacket, and blue-green shorts with bright flame patterns on the lower body. It looks very similar to the Japanese gang, Tiger Claw Gang. They all like bright clothes and enjoy running casinos and sex toy bars. The silence lasted for a while, and the sound of police sirens could not be heard afterwards. The skinny monkey is even more nervous. This indicates that the super elite terror mobile team of Night City may have already been deployed. That is a group of very comprehensive super warriors who have undergone physical and mental transformations. They usually capture the cyber mental illness of those physical and willpower unable to withstand the transformation, undergo mental treatment, and finally be absorbed into the team. Some have only been cured on the surface, and there have been news of terrorist mobile team members experiencing relapse of mental illness and indiscriminate killings. This is the plague god in the group who can kill hostages together. Being targeted by this group of people, being able to piece together a whole body by a forensic doctor can be considered a virtue in one's previous life. The caterpillar also noticed the abnormality, but he felt very calm in his heart because he knew the strength of these two strong men. Fortunately, he had two experts from the headquarters to help him this time. Although they haven't made any moves yet. The caterpillar suddenly felt an impulse in his heart, and he wanted to look back at the two masters to soothe the faint unease in his heart. Where are people? I'm getting married to Nima, where are people? The caterpillar turned around and found that the two silent masked men had disappeared. The door in the back seat is still fluttering and opening in the wind, like the gills of a dying fish. The caterpillar suddenly panicked. Yu reading www.uukangshu.net. It's over, it's over. I understand everything now. I became an abandoned child and didn't expect us to return alive from the beginning. Thinking of this, the caterpillar showed a pitiful smile. If it weren't for not having enough righteous bodies on him, he could have turned into cyber psychiatry now. The caterpillar smiled sadly, and a blue light flashed before its eyes, sending a text message to the skinny monkey. A sound immediately came from the back seat carriage, breaking the dull atmosphere. Lee Runs and others were startled. 2 seconds later, the inspection hole between the front of the car and the carriage suddenly opened, and it was a thin monkey looking into the front of the car. Then the caterpillar only heard a roar from the back carriage, followed by a heart-wrenching scream and cursing. Lee Runs and others quickly lowered their heads, afraid of offending this murderer again. After listening, it almost subsided, and the caterpillar sent a message. What should we do now? The skinny monkey didn't use the text message and said directly, go to the tunnel. Those who have the chaotic knife skills, let's pay some money to go in and hide. Suddenly, a sound came from the sky. A black spacecraft-like shuttle module is rapidly approaching the car. The skinny monkey and caterpillar immediately reacted to the sound. Then the police's satellite surveillance showed that the car had stopped in a ghost city in the desert, and 4 hostages and 2 armed bandits entered the nearest house. The reaction is quite fast, it doesn't seem like it's the first time. A white, chubby old police officer's blue light flashed in front of him, giving the order to the terrorist strike force. Only 2 bandits have entered the house, and there may still be 2 in the car. The iron scaffolding is very angry, so please try to keep the whole body for me. I need to give them an explanation.